Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 2 of the Talyathon, where we will be discussing Take a Hint, Dani Brown, which, if you're new to my channel, hi, hello. This is my favorite book that I read last year, and I'm very excited to be reading it with you all, although sometimes when people would talk to me about this book and say things negatively, I was like, oh, I mean, it's okay. You don't have to love the book, but...
But reconsider that because
right. No, it's okay. You all have your own opinions; they're valid. It just hurts a little.
Just know that the correct one is that this one's your favorite of the three.
No, it's okay.
No, jokes. No, I was really excited to read this one. I kind of mentioned to you privately, and I don't remember if I mentioned it on chat last time, but when I read this one the first time, because I read it about a month after Chloe was fresh enough in my mind that I was kind of comparing them, but it was far enough apart that Chloe had time to now kind of marinate and set. So when I read this one and the whole tone and everything was different, I didn't dislike it, but I found myself but I didn't like it as much. And when this one's getting so much praise compared to it, I'm like, maybe it was a me thing. Maybe I just read it in a weird mood. So I was really excited to reread this one to kind of cement what those thoughts were. And I know we're going to go into this a little bit later. I'm happy to say I did like it on the reread a bit more than the first time. Still don't think I like it more than Chloe.
I think that's a pretty popular opinion. I think that people usually Chloe and Eve have a camp, and then Dani is the odd one out, which honestly fits the girls. Let's be honest.
Definitely.
Because I feel like Chloe and Eve are a little closer than Dani is. I mean, they're all close, but
no, absolutely.
Dani's the black sheep of the family, let's be honest.
And I think that also I'm pretty sure she's the middle child too, so I feel like that also kind of works tonally with that as well. And I do like how each of these books kind of not only represent the girls really well, but almost have a family dynamic of their own, which is really interesting. Just if you believe the whole sibling theory, your first sibling, your middle sibling, and your youngest, you can feel that almost resonating through.
You really can.
The tone of the books, which is a really
and even the way that each sister perceives her family.
Yes, it's so interesting.
Yeah,
it's and reading them back to back, knowing all the sisters by this point, thinking just to revisit them, spend time with them, really allows for this super interesting dynamic to emerge.
It really does, and that's what I think one of my favorite things about reading them all together. And I think after we read Eve, we'll really be able to discuss this. But just really being able to see the characters in the other books, seeing Dani in Chloe's book. And then the next week going into Dani's book and then realizing that all of what she said in Chloe's book makes 100% sense.
When they were mentioning the Eve stuff, I found myself trying to remember on Eve's timeline, did this already happen? Was this
mentioned? I mean, especially with Dani when they were talking about how she was going to go off and do this big project, and I was like, wait, is that how Eve's book started?
Right? Or they're talking about the wedding. It's I can't believe all the stuff with the wedding. I'm like, no, we definitely talked about that wedding.
Yeah.
That's the same wedding.
Right, which we'll talk about next week. But
yeah. That was so towards the beginning. I feel like that wasn't a spoiler.
It's not that. I'm pretty sure it's on the synopsis.
So,
because it's not Chloe or Dani's wedding.
No, exactly. It's not. It's someone else's wedding that Eve is just involved with, and it leads to the inciting incident. But yeah, either way, super interesting.
Yes. Hello, Emily. I'm so sorry. We normally do them on Saturdays, but because of 4th of July weekend and travel plans, we had to do it tonight. Yes. But I hope that when you finish it, you will come back and watch it. So, sorry. Next week will be on Saturday, I promise.
Yeah, for sure. Saturday next week. We had to squeeze.
I forgot about the 4th of July. I'm not going to be on. I'm not going to be. I forgot about it when I was making this. We should do it over these 3 weeks.
See, same here, because with COVID last year, no one did. I hope no one did anything for 4th of July.
Yeah.
I know all the stuff in my area except for fireworks were canceled because you could watch fireworks from your house. And so this year when it came across,
I forgot about it. I just was trying to do it before my work gets crazy at the end of July towards beginning of August. So I was like, okay, these 3 weeks work perfectly.
Yeah, and I also registered like I had time off because like of the being observed. So I'm like, it was a 3-day weekend, so it's time to get everything read and taken care of. But like, neglected to
the fact that we can actually do things this year, kind of, sort of.
Not only that we do things, but like people have the day off because of an event. This is a Memorial Day or Labor Day where it's like one of those like fake holidays where it's like, thank you for giving me the day off, but like I'm not doing anything for this, as opposed to like, 4th of July, Christmas and whatnot. It's like, oh, wait a second. I have this day off because people usually have plans. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, yes. Hello.
No. Okay. Well, I'm really excited to talk everything next week though. Hey, Margaret.
Hello, Margaret. Margaret agrees with you. I think I'm in the minority of people that like Dani better than Chloe.
I think Riley from Riley Marie, and I think Becca from Becca in the Books mentioned they like Dani
maybe
more.
And maybe Chandler, but like
I think Chandler did
or like of the group of like the people that like I actually talk to.
No, I'm really excited to when we go into more details, because here's the thing. I think the reason I think I don't like this one more, I can either talk myself into cementing that or talk myself out of it. I think that'll be really interesting.
Yeah. All right. Oh, Margaret. Margaret. Okay, never mind. You need to have less coffee or tea right now. Okay, so let's talk about themes in this one, and then we'll kind of go more into spoilers. One of the things, and I think we talked about this last week with Chloe, how the characters are very real. They're very like they have issues. They're not cookie cutter, which is one of the things that I love about Talia Hibbert's book. And this one was particularly interesting because not only is it my favorite, but I was also reading another book at the same time by another author that was romance that was just like much worse. And that's not
the one that we've already talked about, or is it
yes.
Okay. No, for sure. I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's the one we talked about. And it was just like the stark contrast of these two books, even though like they had nothing to do with each other, they had nothing in common. It's just like that one was on my TBR, so that's what I read. Anyway, I think that's what like made me love this one, and just the Brown sisters in general and Talia's writing in general. But these two characters have so much baggage.
Oh my god, a ton of baggage, a ton of internalized stuff too. Like when comparing this really quick to like the stuff with like Red and Chloe, their issues, not to say that they didn't have baggage and they didn't have stuff that was internalized, especially Red dealing with the abuse, but it was stuff that could have been shared and a partner could help with the healing process a little bit. These two are entirely internal, between Zaf with his anxiety and the grief with his family, and they kind of worry about that boundary. And then Dani, while she also has relationship trauma, her relationship trauma became so internalized that because of the gaslighting that happened when that long-term relationship of hers ended. And I think that having that with the characters, and also not finding out until much later in the book than with Chloe and Red, like we waited until the very end to figure out like, wow, okay. Wow, that really led to this interesting dynamic with them, and the fact of like, Dani, is totally cool that you want like no casual relationships, but then once you find out why that is, it's like, I mean, I would too in that situation.
Right, yeah. So that's, and I think it while they can help each other with it, and they do, I mean, the scene where Zaf has a panic attack and Dani like plops on the ground and it's just like, okay, we're gonna breathe through this, we're gonna do like, what do you need, what do you want? Like she had no prep going into that. Like, yes,
she said that she Googled for like 5 minutes because like he mentioned anxiety and that was him.
Right, yeah, but like she had never been a part of that, like a panic attack. She had never like witnessed that. Like she just jumped in and was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And then on the flip side of that, like Dani has a very defined way that partners should treat, or do treat, not should, but do treat each other.
Yep.
And it's shitty. And it's, she expects partners to be mad at her for working so much and to be upset that she forgets important dates. Whatever the case may be, she just expects Zaf to be that way. And when he isn't, she's very perplexed by it.
Yes.
And that is like the thing I resonate with Dani about, is that like, it's like, oh, not all humans are shitty, awful people.
I really like that this was a dual POV story so much, specifically for scenes like that. When you have, Dani, getting ready to dig in those heels, defend the reason, like, I'm sorry, I'm busy with all this stuff, but then is off, like, genuinely shocked that not only does she not have to do that, but that the other stuff is taken care of. It's like, yeah, you have to, you didn't eat, you're busy, so here's
you go. Right.
You're welcome.
Well, and then also the dual POV is super not helpful, but like, it's really cool to see, because not only does Zaf not internally think like, oh man, it'd be really nice if I could talk to my girlfriend tonight, but he like worships the ground she walks on.
But like, it doesn't feel fake or superficial. It genuinely feels the fact that like, I'm in adoration with how passionate you are about this. I don't know what you're talking about, but the fact that you're this excited makes me this excited.
Yeah.
And I think it's the first time he went to her apartment, and like, he gets a like little look inside her mind, and is genuinely like between the bookshelves, the post-it notes, talking about like, oh, I'm watching her brain on the wall, piece all this stuff together. Like, it's so genuine, and you hear this like an admiration that he has for her. And then when he makes it the fact of like, oh yeah, her mind's going through 85 things, it makes sense that she doesn't have time to break this concentration. And so Dani's,
and he loves the fact that like, she has a 5-minute break that's set into her night, and he's like, wow, you want to spend that 5 minutes with me rather than like going to the bathroom or like taking care of yourself?
No, exactly. And then you have Dani on the other side. It's like getting ready, and every time he's okay with it, she's like, what?
Yeah, there's got to be another shoe that's gonna drop. Yeah. Whereas she's internally thinking like, oh, he's gonna be mad because I only have 5 minutes to talk and I can't like go on and on. I have to get back to work. And he's like, cool, I get 5 minutes.
She's picking me for those precious 5 minutes. So I really liked that part of their relationship. I think
also the part that he was so enthralled with like her work. Even though he understood none of it. Like when they did the symposium, and he was like telling the guy that was sitting, like he was like fanning over the fact that, oh, you're a professional rugby, like, oh, I watched you all the time. He's like, shut up, my girlfriend is talking.
My girlfriend is doing something that she is proud of, and if I miss it because you're being dumb, I'm going to be so mad at you. Like, that's precious. That's so precious. And it's also really great because there are so many partners that have had people in their life knock down their interest so much that you see it so much as like that, I'm sorry you bring this up, or like you naturally find yourself clamming up because you're used to people not caring. And so having that partner be like, I'm sorry, you're going to continue. And if I have a question, you can answer it for me because I'm
and the fact that she was so amazed that he was like in the ballpark and that like game that they were doing of like, what is he goes, what's Dani's major? And he's like, I'm close, right?
He's like, I use the same words, but that's the same thing, right?
And she's like, oh God, he's gonna get it wrong. They're not like, he's never gonna know it. And he's like, oh, you listen to me? Like, that's so weird.
My favorite with that newlywed game type scene is their justifications for knowing the answers. Like, we're not days like, he eats the same chips every day. Why would I not notice that?
Like, she brings the tea every day. Like,
he does comment on my tea. Would you look at that? It's so cute because it's one of those things.
They're just oblivious, and it's really cute.
It's so precious. And also, like, as someone that like notices random facts about the people in my life, to the point that like I've accidentally creeped them out by like throwing some information out there. It's like, oh, I promise I'm not like cyber stalking you. I just am.
Remember that one time you said something.
Situation. It's so sweet seeing that embodied in a book as like a norm at a time where like yes, he had feelings for her. Yes, she entertained the idea of feelings, but this was so early in the fake dating that they were just like,
Right.
this was just like a friendship at that point. It's like,
Right.
why would my friend not know this about me? It was so cute.
Yeah. Friends to lovers is always my favorite trope when it comes to romance. It's funny how like when I first started reading, it used to be hate to love. But like I've read so many good friends to lovers that like I have read less bad ones. Let's just put it that way.
It
Whereas like
hits.
hate to love, it can be done really well, but it can also be done really poorly.
I think the reason it hits so different is because there's always like that, like, I'm not gonna say everybody because like we're not a monolith, but there's something about having that person that's been in your life be able to move to a different part of your life.
Yeah.
Like that always feels really great. But especially when it's someone that you're that close to, that you're that safe with, a person that like already had that, they know me, they see me at my best, they see me at my worst. Now there's not that awkwardness. It's like that genuine beautiful like feeling that now gets amplified into something more. And it's also nice to see books start to like normalize the fact that like, yes, friends can just be friends, but also friends can be more, and you don't have to worry about that risk of ruining stuff. Like that's not a thing anymore. It's like, yeah, that can happen. Yeah, friends that they can not go back to being friends, but also
Right.
like you can also have a very healthy progression of a friendship into a relationship,
Yeah. Right.
whatnot. And I think that the one of the reasons that this one works so well is because their friendship never felt weird from the start. Like you never
Right.
felt like, I like her, I will settle for her as a friend, and then now that I have this opportunity, I'm going to leap on it. It's a fact of there is this mutual attraction because of their friendship, and that was able to progress into the relationship.
Right. No, that totally makes sense.
I think we need to check the comments.
Oh no, you're good. Check the private chat real fast.
Yeah, I got you.
Anyway, yeah, no, that I think that's why like friends like they weren't like best friends. They were more acquaintances that like flirted with each other.
Yeah, they were
So like they
solid.
knew each other and they didn't have any like you know, hate towards each other or anything like that. But it wasn't like they were like, okay, we're gonna be best friends and then we're gonna like, you know,
I also
have sex.
like that they were friends from adulthood, not childhood,
Yeah,
because I don't dislike that trope. But I feel like there's an extra level of baggage when like you literally grow
right.
up with someone on like a platonic level and then graduate to romantic versus
Well, and
adult.
romance tends to do that so often where they were like, you know, it's either they were like together in high school and then 20 years later they meet back up,
Right.
or like they had been friends the entire 20 years and then they're like, oh, maybe we should date now.
No, exactly. Like this one definitely felt like they were more than colleagues because they were able to have like this flirty banter with everything. But then it also graduated to mutual pining. Like they recognized that the other one was attractive, but like they recognized the other one was attractive, but it wasn't the reason for their friendship was that they were attractive. It's the fact that I enjoy you as a person and I will register the fact that you're attractive as well.
Right.
And so when it turned into fake dating, it was really easy to like harness those feelings. And I also like that they were concerned about the boundaries, but I also like that it happens. So normally I don't like when fake dating happens for a short term before it turns into like actual dating. This one I didn't mind it
I think
purely
it was a really smooth transition.
it was a smooth transition, and also because of the mutual pining,
Yeah.
it was a very logical progression. The fact of like Zaf never wanted to be a short-term thing. He liked her from the start. He also was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this for the rugby because
Right.
sure, why not? She is okay with this. I will entertain this with her because I want this in it. And the second he couldn't, he was like, I can't do this. Like that
Right.
happened like pretty early on. That happened. So it didn't feel like there was any manipulation in there as well, which is something
Right.
that happens with those friends with benefits relationships. Is like, I'll take what I can get. And then when someone catches feelings, they make a big deal out of it. When for Zaf, we'll get to the end in a second, but like for the most part, it really felt like you don't seem to hate this. Like, do you
Right.
want to consider this?
Well, and I think this also goes back to doing that dual POV, as you kind of saw their timelines as they went along, and the progression of, you know, friends to friends with benefits to, okay, actually I like this person, was kind of about the same timeline.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, obviously,
Exactly.
Zach had a little bit more of a romantic, you know, attraction just because of like his history and his background and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you know, him thinking like his life is a romance novel.
No, exactly. Which was so precious, by the way. We'll get to that in a second.
Yes. No, I was gonna say like one of the like my favorite scenes. I guess it's not a meet cute because they already knew each other,
Mhm.
but you know, the meet cute for the book, best
Yeah.
one. The fact that you're overhearing a romance novel, an audiobook, and she's like, "Are you listening to porn?"
That was so funny. I was dying. Every time I listened to that, I forgot how funny it was. I'm like, it was so good. It was so
Right?
funny.
Like, because like the secondhand embarrassment is just, it's real, because I listen to romance audiobooks and like there's always that lingering fear that you're like, oh, crap, is my you know, is my sound set to my Bluetooth headphone?
Especially like listening in the office.
Yes.
I think I'm like, this is a really bad time for someone to like surprise me and like,
Right.
just walk in on me.
Right.
I
Or your
I miss
headphone batteries to die.
no, like I misplaced my headphones, so I listened to this one just like on speaker, and I'm like,
Oh,
this would be
right.
a really crappy time for someone to like
I mean, at
walk
least you work
downstairs.
from home.
Yeah, but I live with my aunt.
Oh, this is true.
So like that makes it slightly awkward.
Just a bit. Just a bit.
No, yeah, no.
Margaret understands. Margaret understands Zaph's pain.
It's like I try to like if I'm gonna listen to romance at work, I try to keep it like, a certain level of steam. Like I'm not listening
Right.
to Katie Robert at work, put it that way.
Right. But I
Don't
mean,
even
like, this is a steamy book.
This
Like,
one's very
it's towards
Talia
the
Hibbert
end,
is so
but
deceptively steamy.
right.
Like
Well, and we
you
talked about it with like the covers and stuff like that, and how this is becoming a trend.
But like
Uh,
even comparing this to like Bromance Book Club, like they had steam. It wasn't totally fade to black, but like they were heavy petting at best. You
yeah,
could show the whole thing on a movie and not this you are censoring a whole bunch.
whole bunch.
Also the language that she chooses to use is so explicit. I'm not mad at it, but like it is so
Okay, so
explicit.
this is the one thing that I don't remember, and maybe you do because I'm just, you know, bad at remembering books that I read last week. But how different is the wording of the smutty scenes from Chloe to Dani? Because I think this one was more, but now
it was a little bit more, and I think a lot of that is because the actual dirty talking the characters were doing as opposed to the descriptions. The
right,
descriptions are pretty much the same, but in like Chloe, you had read kind of like I'm gonna do this to you, so his language a bit more seductive but slightly toned down as opposed to Dani, who is very explicit in her
right.
descriptions, and I think that's where it came from.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Because like, and then we kind of talked about this before, but like, Dani is a very sexual person. Like, she is very confident in her body. She's very confident in who she is, and the fact that like people are attracted to her.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I don't think Chloe is that way.
I think that Chloe was very I am a sexual being, but mostly because of like especially because she kind of talked up to her chronic rep or her chronic illness. It was the fact that like I'm not always in the mood for this, therefore I really haven't had a partner who is just like okay with it. So hers was like, yeah, I just read Margaret's comment about Promise Book. Okay, that's fair.
Romance Book Club, so now I can read it.
I forgot you haven't read that yet. Oh my.
That's the next one when it first came out, I was not in a headspace for second chance romances.
That's fair.
So then I just like wrote off the whole series.
If it makes you feel better, the first one and the fourth one are sports romances, so you would love those.
Okay, then.
It's baseball and then hockey. This is the next thing that we're doing a read along for. Is I'm making you read all of these. I'm making you read all of these.
Okay.
No, No, but what I was saying before, if I can remember my train of thought,
You're talking about Dani being more sexual than Chloe.
yeah, I think one of the things that worked really well with this is the fact that, like, yes, Chloe definitely was like kind of interested in partners, but had other priorities, and so the book was at. As for Dani, we opened with her having a relationship that had ended poorly. And
her literally praying for a friends with benefits.
Right.
Or that is her priority at this point.
And I also kind of liked why she justified this is what I want. Like, I mean, it became a very large plot point, which I know we'll talk about when we talk more about like the ending and the relationship as is. But I think that one of the things that worked with Dani is that because she was so confident and comfortable being in her sexuality, she was like, and Eve kind of does this too, is the fact of, yeah, I know I'm hot. What you gonna say about her? When the guy was hitting on her, and like her and her friends like, do you believe this? Asking me to dinner. Are you guys talking about me? Oh, you picked up on that.
Yeah.
Good job. You fat slut. Oh, I'm a fat slut. Okay. that you wanted to get dinner with 5 seconds ago.
Right.
Thanks for that. And I feel like that definitely, that energy carried over, which was really nice. I also feel like, not to say that Chloe and Red didn't have a ton of interaction because their steamy scenes got so steamy.
Right. Yeah.
I think that the attraction with Dani and Zaf was written to be more intense.
Well, and I wonder if it was because Chloe and Red started out as a romantic relationship. So they had romantic feelings for each other. Whereas Dani and Zaf started as a physical relationship.
Yes.
I mean, especially like from Dani's point of view. They had, you know, they
and so it was passion first, emotion
trying to stay monetized here. So they were doing it before they actually had feelings for each other.
No, exactly. I think that because theirs was so passion first, it felt more explicit almost because
maybe
they just cared about the O and like getting to the O. That's the goal, as opposed to like Red and Chloe had like the emotions, then like the tension, and then the stuff before the stuff, and then finally like
this one was like I would say that we definitely talked about the male having a hard-on earlier in Dani's book than we did in Chloe's book.
I think that not only was it talked about more, it was teased because like I think it was that library scene, one of the earlier scenes when Zaf mentioned being very excited and how excited he was, and the fact that it was more explicitly described how excited he was. And then Dani kind of took the bait on how excited he was and then kind of turned that into a much more intense thing, as opposed to
that scene.
That scene was top notch. It was so good. No, I think that's a large reason of why it feels, because like I know that we were talking, is this the most? I think this is the most passion heavy, therefore it feels it, but I feel like Eve is in the running for being slightly more explicit.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember now, but
after
we'll talk about it next week, I guess.
Yeah. After Jacob finds the thing, I feel like that's kind of when it took a turn.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that next week.
Just a bit. But yes. Anyways, we can get into like some more spoilery stuff if we want to talk about like specific scenes or specific like themes, character developments, stuff like that. So this is now a spoiler zone.
Yes. All right. Do we want to talk about the mental health rep in this one?
Yes.
So I feel like that was a huge part of the story.
Way more than it was. I mean, I think that mental health is addressed in Chloe's story, but it's related to their trauma or like their past relationships and working through that. This is like diagnosed, labeled anxiety and depression.
Yes. And I think that like I absolutely love the way that Red's mental health issues due to his abuse and his imposter syndrome and all of that was handled. I think that Talia stepped up so much when it came to Zaf. And you had things about consciously choosing when to take medicine and when not to, and the repercussions of that, and different ways that things are handled because of that. And I think that this was some of some of the best anxiety rep I think I've ever read about in a book, coming from someone that has very high
Yeah.
anxiety, and being able to resonate so much with the fact that, like, someone made an offhanded comment and now that is all you are hyperfixating
Right.
on for like 5 minutes, or how like
the email from his coach.
the
That one,
email,
like
yeah,
when he physically couldn't open that email and respond to it because of like how it was making him feel and how it was transporting him back to that time where his like where all of the
everything
trauma
happened.
happened. Yeah,
Mhm.
like that
No, for
is
sure.
so relatable.
That was super relatable, and the way that it was, that push, like the random push that gets to it, and then once you have the push to open it, and then you just do all the other things that you were worried to do, including like the declaration and the bold statement and the this and the that. It's like,
I love that he was so proud that he was like, that's the first thing he did is he told Dani, I
which
responded to the email.
that was so cute. I also think it was really good that he was so open with his anxiety, because
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like his charity is
And as I
breaking.
say, it's part of his character. Like that's definitely like he's already been through a lot of things prior to the start of this book, and he's
Yeah.
dealt with a lot of stuff. But you can tell that like he's not a fixed human being. He's still going
No.
through this.
No, I think that one of the reasons I like that he was so open about it with Dani is that it gave context to a lot of his actions, and then Dani wasn't able to recognize things, like when Zaf meets, I'm blanking on her friend's name right now, but meets
Sorcha?
Yeah.
I want to say it's like Sora or Sorcha.
Yeah. I was
Yeah,
saying Sonia, but I don't know. Let me just
I don't remember. But anyway, I know who you're talking about.
like meets her for the first time, and he completely clams up and his
Yeah.
entire personality changes, and Dani is like, I am so sorry for not warning you, I forgot how you are with people, and like
Right.
has that like, oh, this isn't the Zaf that I know, because the Zaf that I know is different with me
Right.
than
Or
with you.
the text message when she sends when she's on her period and she's like, I'm
Yeah,
drowning in
he's drowning in
blood.
blood,
And
and
he
he's
like
like,
freaks out thinking she's dying.
no, exactly. It's one of those where it's like people are hyperbolic, but she is the one to send a text message if she just hurt herself.
Right.
And then like with like the wheels clicking, it's
The
like,
wheel starts spinning, and then what? But like when he calls her, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Like, what's going on?" And then she goes, "Oh,
he's like,
I
no,
said
no,
a
I got
thing.
it. No,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
got it. No,
yeah."
I got it. I got it.
But
Thank you.
like
No, I
the fact that was like oh I forgot that your that your response to something like that is so high.
Yeah, no, I think that like on both of them it worked really well, between his, like him for the wheels clicking, and then like, oh my god, I'm so dumb, and then her
Right.
with a, I am so sorry for forgetting that you would have taken that in a very different way. I think those two things combined added a really interesting dynamic, because it was like, no, that makes sense, because exactly how they
Yeah.
both would have
I,
reacted to that.
I think while being dumb, like they are a little bit dumb, and with the third act breakup is definitely not as good as Chloe's. But like they might miscommunicate a few times, but they are adults about this relationship, and they do look out for each other.
Let's talk about the third act breakup then,
Okay.
because I think that's where I think that's for me the defining moment that compare this one to Chloe's and which one I like the most. And it's because I did not like the third act breakup in this one as much. It's far from being the worst one I've ever read. I've had
Right.
way worse ones, especially when it was a friend's mutual pining, one person doesn't reciprocate a situation. But like, the reason I think that this one for me didn't work as much is partially because the communication that was there with Red and Chloe wasn't, because both of them assumed the other one needed to internalize. However, they both internalized backwards. So Dani's like, he would need to talk to me about it. Like, let me get him to know that I didn't mean it that way. Let's talk. And then he's not there. And then Zaf is like, she just needs to process her emotions. I rushed her way too much. Let me not face her.
I
And
wonder
so,
if they were doing that because like the entire book, and we like we were just talking about how the entire book they grow in their like support and care for each other, and they're learning each other. And so at this point they're like, okay, like I need to put my own things aside and do like what they need but then actually like they're both doing that at the same
I
time.
think the only reason why it bothered me is that while they were doing that, they were also communicating on top of that. And this one, they just weren't doing that communication bit.
Right.
It was the fact of like, I feel like I need to see him in person. It's like, okay, but message him, hey, can we talk? Can I see you? Can I?
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it was just like, oh, he's not here again and again, to the point like he's going, like she goes to Fatima. I was like, hey, can you help me with this? Instead of like,
Yeah.
which I get that he's doing, that she did a
I
grand gesture since she likes romance novels and is kind of
right.
playing into that.
I love
Like, I
that.
totally get it, but like looking at this as like a adult talking to adult, everything was so strong up to that point. And now this is the section all of a sudden we're just like it's one thing if like she tried to contact him and he didn't respond and then
Uh-huh.
she went to Fatima, totally would have been fine. But she didn't even try to reach out. She was like, I don't see him in person. Let's go to this next one.
Right. I think so. Generally, miscommunication tropes don't work for me. We talked about this last week. But I think in this instance, I never had a problem with it. And it was just because of how much of a mess they both are.
That's fair.
Like if you think back to like other books that have miscommunication tropes, they communicate fine up until the third act, and then we forget how to use a cell phone.
Yeah, that's fair.
Whereas this one, they don't know how to communicate ever.
Like, I think that one of the things that like this book works in and out of its favor is that because these characters feel so realistic, it's like, yeah, I totally get that, like, you know, you're on like this high of the relationship, you say too much, the other person kind of pulls away, then you're like, okay, I'm gonna let them process and then talk to them, and the other one's like, I just want to see them, but they're not here, and then kind of like doing this big grandiose thing. And I get that, like, no, he really likes romance novels, so she's like, let me do a romance novel for her, get him like this big grandiose moment, like all of that I didn't mind. But I just feel like there should have been like a little bit more like communication attempt before we got to this, before like the escalation, especially because she even mentions her talking to a student is such like an unprofessional thing to do, even
Right.
in the situation that she's in. And so I can see her kind of like as a last resort, it's like, I've tried to call him, he's not returning my calls, I don't know if I completely lost this or not, but just in case, let me reach out and see if maybe I can save it. But it was no, it's just the fact of, I can't do this over text, I didn't see him, boom. But it wasn't even a, can we meet? It wasn't even a, calls not being answered. It wasn't active avoidance of, she goes there and then like he transferred to a different thing. It was just completely nothing, and then big
Right.
gestures. I guess I just wanted to see a little bit more of an attempt of communication first.
That makes sense. I mean, I guess that makes sense. But also, texting somebody who I feel like I wronged, literally the most anxiety-inducing thing I've ever
That's true. That's true. Like, you know, that's
like
so
you're like because you can't
no.
like when you can actually like see them, you can see their response. When you're just text, you're like, did they get it? Are they still mad?
No,
Like,
see,
why aren't they responding?
no, see, that's why I get. That's why I think I wanted, especially because it was like Dani who wanted to reach out. She even made a point to say like, I need to have this conversation in person. I guess I would have like, even would have loved to see both of them kind of like, you know, go for the phone then put it back. Like Dani was
Oh
like
yeah.
a kind of like one-off comment and then didn't see him
No,
and then
I get
kind of
that.
escalate.
Right.
I would have liked to see on both sides a bit more of like a, no, goes to call and then immediately changes the mind, types
Yeah.
out a message and then deletes it, tries to reach out through other means because like they want to, and kind of are like, I don't know, kind of comparing this to Chloe. Red tried to reach out,
Yeah.
it didn't work, so then he did the packages and then let Chloe make the final decision. I
Right.
think we're just kind of missing that in between step before we got to the grand gesture. I think even if it just was a, you know, I tried like, because like he admits that like he couldn't face her, so like he stayed home from work for a few days and kind of panicked it that way. But
Right.
even if it was like the first day after when he thought that he could do it, he like goes like but sees her, so like finds an excuse to go and then is out from there. And so Dani like sees him, gets ready to talk to him. He's now gone and now doesn't see him for 4 days. Even like that one extra step I think would have helped with this. It just felt like it was slightly too much. Especially because even up to here, were they the best at communicating? No, but they at least both made a valiant effort to. I recognize this, so X. I feel like we're just missing one baby step in there.
Right. Yeah. Nope. That's fair. That makes sense.
But again, it's like far from the worst third act breakup, and I do like that it didn't feel super forced. Like it got to. I also forgot how late in the book it was. Like I was listening to the audiobook, and I'm like, we have an hour. We have an hour left of this.
Yeah. I mean, it was very much, you know, chapter breakup, chapter pining, chapter, you know, resolution, and epilogue.
No, and it's like I guess the only reason like for this one, that speed,
which is fine for me. I hate third act breakups that get prolonged.
I hate third act breakups hard stop. I think one of the reasons this one worked is because they had that level of friendship, and then they also had the vulnerable communication, so they knew what they did wrong. And they both acknowledge, like even when Zaf is talking to his sister-in-law and it's like, oh no, did you spill your heart? Yeah.
Well, and even in that resolution scene, like they're both apologizing. It's like I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. No, you know.
No, exactly. It's like I wish they didn't have to. I also like that was only 4 days. Like both of these, it was such a short amount of time. It wasn't a breakup. It was we had an argument. Let's now
talk about it. Yeah.
It has the emotional like heartbreak because you don't know what the resolution of it's going to be. But like in the grand scheme, it wasn't this big dramatic breakup. It was a few days without talking when we sorted out emotions and we figured it out ourselves.
Right, with cooler heads. Yeah, exactly.
So no, I feel like that's one of the things that worked super well about this. I think like another thing that worked really well in this one is the overall support systems of the characters. It's something that we found in both the books really well. Is that our characters have fantastic support systems that they are willing to use when things get to be too much.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, obviously, like the central part would be the sisters. Like, and I love that they also make quite a few appearances.
Yeah.
But then also like the love interest have their own family, their friends.
No, and I feel like that's the thing that's so important when it comes to these type of books. Like, don't get me wrong, I love me a good romance novel, and I love like, you know, kind of focusing on the couple. But it's so nice to know that these people are like talking about things when they mess up, not just like, you know, stewing in it, but having healthy conversations of like, I mess up, what do I do? When Dani was sad and her friend took her to her sisters, is like, we need a full intervention.
We need an intervention.
Like, I can't believe you snitched on me. It's like I would be pissed if you didn't
love the
snitch.
Chloe and Red scene when Chloe's on the phone with Red and she's like, if you have anyone that can hide a body, and it was like, yes, because soft boy Red definitely has friends that can hide a body.
I love that so much. It's like, honey, you're an artist. I'm not making assumptions. I just know that you know a wide variety of people. That was so funny.
Yes.
No, and I feel like a lot of these scenes just work because we have so much time with the other characters. It really allows for these cameo scenes just to have this extra like depth to them too.
Absolutely.
So like we got to know Red. We know like what a sweetie he is, and then we get the fact of like Chloe, and we know how much in Chloe's book she relied on her sisters, and now that like things are the other way, Red's like, if it's that guy, then no, absolutely not. Thank you for thinking of me though. Like that was just too precious.
Yes, it was adorable. And I think like even in that you see which I think you see more about Chloe than Eve, but you can really see Chloe's personality because Talia had already explored Chloe's personality. And so it was just an extension of it. Whereas Eve, I still feel like in Chloe and Dani's story, while she's definitely quirky, she's a little two-dimensional, which is fine. She gets her own book and then we explore it. But like whereas Dani was a little bit two-dimensional in Chloe's book, Chloe seems more three-dimensional. It could just be because we just finished reading her book, and so we're interpreting it. But I think that maybe it's also because Talia has already explored it.
And I definitely think it's because she's been already explored. Like, we learn a little bit about each of the sisters and the other sisters' books, but it's not till their own we fully know who they are. And I feel like that allows these to be better on the reread than the initial ones. Cause I think you were mentioning this last time, is that like Eve was almost annoying in Chloe's books. The first time you read her, it's like, I get that you're the younger sibling, but damn, but by the time you get to Eve's book, you're like, oh, I love you, just kidding.
Yeah,
oh, I love you. You're fantastic.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense.
No, I guess like we can kind of touch on some of the other representation here. We had a lot of really fantastic rep in here between the Muslim representation. I know that I can't speak to that.
Yeah, but neither one of us are going to speak on that, but it was there.
From what I have seen in reviews, people definitely seem to be pleased with the little bit of the representation.
The only thing that people have issues, or not, I won't say the only thing, but the thing that I have seen that people have issues with is the fact that there's premarital sex.
Yeah.
And that's I mean, that's kind of a, but again, I'm not on Voices, so I don't really want to talk on that.
No, for sure.
Generally what some of the like lower star reviews from Own Voices.
I can definitely understand that. I do, again, not Own Voices, but I do like that Talia made a point to not have him be like super orthodox, and then also have that you definitely tell that it's more of a not to like put words in the mouth, but it appears that he has a more casual relationship with it compared to some of his other family members who seem to be more orthodox. So it's like at least we do have that distinction in there, is the fact of he does identify as someone who is Muslim, but you also don't see him like making a point to do other things that like would have the premarital sex feel out of place. But
Dani is so full of representation. I think that's like one of the things that when I like talk about when I'm talking about this book, and I'm like, Dani's a bisexual witch. I don't need to know anything else.
No, it's like, no, I like that. I can't speak specifically to her form of practice since it is a little close culture with a little bit of eclectic rep in there, but
go for it.
The little bit that I can speak about is that I did like the way that she came into the craft. I thought that was very interesting and very believable, especially when you see in more close practices that are passed down, that like some people have that interest, some people don't. The interest can come later. And I like the fact that Dani made a point that because she did not have the actual teachings, her practice is very eclectic. While it is mostly rooted in this particular type of witchcraft, it does have what feels right for me is what I do.
Right.
So you have it be much more eclectic, which is definitely how a lot of people do that now. Not all. You definitely have some that follow a more strict path, but I do like that Talia kept hers a lot more eclectic, especially since she did not have like a more formal training going into a more closed practice.
Right.
The way that she depicted some of the things like the altar and the deities, that pretty good from what I've seen. I loved her necklaces. Do that too. So I love the fact that like you have like the little bit of the comfort with it. I love the way the Zaf was.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I like the way that Zaf like just accepts it, and like she tells him, and he's like, okay, cool, like let's
it's not
a big deal, but also the scene when he sees the altar and he's like, oh, that's an altar, and I'm just like staring at it.
Right, like he's into it, but like he's also very curious about it. He asks a little about it.
Any type of negative reaction to like, oh God, what are you gonna? You're gonna put a spell on me or something?
No, exactly. He didn't fall any of those traps. He didn't diminish the crystals, which I really appreciated, because for people that do believe in like the metaphysical properties of crystals, it's so demeaning just to be told like, oh no, thank you. Like, so when she gives him the garnet beforehand, regardless if he actually felt better with it or not, it was more the fact of she trusted him enough to be like, this can help. And even if it didn't, like he was like, I mean, for him it looks like it did, but even if he didn't believe it was the garnet, it was Dani, he wasn't a jerk about it. He was like, Thank you. I really appreciated that, and I really like that scene.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was one of my like things that like I think you how do I put this? Sometimes, especially with like romance books, when they try to add witchcraft into it, someone it may not be the love interest, but someone usually tends to be like negative or demeaning to a part of the practice. Usually the crystals, or or the like the just the one offs of being like, oh, you're gonna hex me, or you're gonna put a spell, like because they like clearly are clueless to like what is what it actually is. And I'm really glad that she never put like Talia never went down that road.
I also really like the fact that she kept it very realistic. She never tried to make it like mystical. Like, yeah, they were doing a prayer and a ceremony to a goddess, but she didn't have it be this like dramatic, hocus pocus things effective. No, Dani talks about like lighting candles, meditating, leaving offerings with the orange peels, like that's an offering or whatnot. Like that's as opposed to like making like a whole song and dance about it, which you see in like some other depictions.
Right. Well, and the fact that like, okay, she prayed for this Friends with Benefits, and she like that's they did this whole ceremony, and so one could believe that that is how her and Zaf got together. It was divine intervention. But then also like there's also a perfectly realistic explanation that it's not that.
I actually even the book addressed on the fact of like when Dani, like her friend was like, you need to take the stuff that resonates. You can't just be cherry picking signs everywhere. Yeah. And so for someone who's not familiar with how that works, it's like, you're right. Like yeah, people have manifestations and they ask the deity for assistance and whatnot, but there's also a lot of, free will, and you have to make your own choices with it. And so when her friend was like, yeah, not everything is like a sign, my guy. Like, yeah, you felt this one, but like you know better than that. I really like that she did to make a point to include that, so other people won't be like, oh my gosh, it's a love spell. It's like, no, it wasn't a love spell. It was It was it was an open manifestation that was later fulfilled. And even like when later on, like when they're hooking up or whatnot, she reframes it and kind of keeps it more open that way too.
Mm-hmm. There's another book that I read last year, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, that was kind of the same thing where it was, oh, I can't find it. Where like it was a romance. It was contemporary-ish, but like with a witch, and it was like very obviously like love spell. Now I can't remember what the name of the book was. I mean, the author's name was Mila Nix.
Okay. I'll write it down.
Black Witch Magic, I think. Yeah, that's it. Black Witch Magic.
Okay.
And like, I didn't resonate with that one as much, but like it was very obviously like a love spell. And it was like she like put something in the food, and I was just like, that's one way to do that, but this is another way.
No, and I like the way that she did it. She kept it very because like going down that path, when love spells are involved, consent now becomes a question, whether it's a fantastical or non-fantastical depiction. So the way that Talia did it, that's now not even a thing that people have to worry about. It was very clear that it was an open manifestation. It was meditation. No name was given, and so she was able to say if it resonates that it was Zaf, but she could have easily said, oh, it's not Zaf. It's someone else. So I did appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. But then also the LGBT representation.
I love the bi-rep in this book.
It's so great. I was really like when the book first came out, I was really hoping for pan rep. Just because like, she has the bright pink hair. And like I was just, really hoping for that. Unfortunately not. But Gigi's pan, so I'm happy.
Yeah. No, quick tangent. I do wish that more books and media start using other forms of multi-gender attraction than just bi. Like even with the Redacted show, I don't want to spoil anyone on the Redacted show on Disney Plus, everyone's talking about that just confirmed a character. The character never uses that word. Everyone assigned that word to them just because they express multi-gender attraction. It's like, but that character almost makes more sense being pan than bi, but
100%.
everyone's like heard multi-gender attraction, immediately assigned the bi label. It's like,
but also we'll take what we can get in that instance.
exactly. Like I know other people like
in books, we've moved past that.
Exactly.
We are past.
We should have moved past that. I think is more, especially when it comes to multi-gender attraction. The fact of is there a difference between bi, pan, poly, omni? Yes, absolutely. There is a distinct difference between those. That's why the different labels exist. Also, for some people, the labels kind of mesh, but for the most part, is there a distinct label? Yes, there is absolutely.
Right.
That being said, we need to get better at actively identifying the different ones, especially when you're talking bi and pan. There is a difference between them. One is not more trans inclusive than the other. And it's even slightly more than like the two or more versus all. Like there is a slightly deeper distinction between them. And
the way that I define it is that pan is attraction to somebody despite their gender. So it's like A, this person is attractive, B, this person is gender XYZ.
Like so how I see, I think you and I are kind of saying the same thing, is that I am attracted to people because of gendered characteristics. If I'm interested in a guy, it's muscles, it's facial hair, it's bone structure. If it's a girl, it's characteristics. If it's someone who's NB, it's physical characteristic, as opposed to pan, I think is more person regardless of said characteristics. Exactly. Like saying that, like not saying that.
I mean, yes, like I think pan, and I think even then though you start talking about whether or not, like you can still be attracted to certain characteristics of a gender.
It's person first, characteristics second. As I think for bi, it's more of like when you think of attraction and more like other situations where it's like characteristics then person. I think pan is I'm attracted to the person, the characteristics are secondary. Yes, I'm attracted to them, but that doesn't play into the attraction.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I think it's still under the same umbrella. Like
they're totally under
the same. Is the umbrella that like pan, poly, and omni fall under.
No, exactly. And I think that like because people are still to this day so confused on what the difference is and confused why we need both labels is why we need books to be better at depicting both labels.
Yeah. And there's not a lot of pan representation.
No, I know that some people were actually like a little grumpy that the characters in the Sierra Simone's books were bi, not pan, because their presentation was definitely written more as pan as opposed to bi, and so it was a very easy way for it to be at least have some of them be pan, some be bi, if not all of them.
Right.
And so but yeah, no, I think that for Dani, her being bi does make sense.
Right. And no, I'm talking about like when they announced Dani.
Oh no, for sure.
And they showed the cover. I was like, maybe we'll get pan for that.
No, for sure. No, I guess I never.
I totally see her being bi.
And I also like the fact that her sexuality wasn't a deal. Like it wasn't a big deal with anyone. It's the fact of Zaf noticed that
it was a fact of life.
No, exactly. Like Zaf noticed that she had a previous relationship with someone who presents as female, and so was wondering like, what is it? And then when she was showing interest in him, she's like, I'm bi. And he's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm an option.
It's a very adult 21st century thing to have.
Which is great. No, especially because like there are some people that make a deal out of it, like you're bi, and then you get like all like the crappy comments like, what is this, 1995? Come on, like move past it, Right. But like it was super nice to see that just be like a matter of fact thing that I have pink hair, I'm bisexual, I'm a witch, I'm a PhD student. Pick your poison, which I really think is one of the biggest strong points of the series, that like for the characters, all of the tidbits about them are so matter of fact.
Yeah.
Yes, Zaf has anxiety, but he's also this other thing too. Yes, Chloe has
also the uncle. He's also like the cool uncle, and he's this coach.
No, exactly. Yeah. And I feel like that's one of the things that I think that makes the rep in Talia Hibbert's book so good. We'll talk about this more next week. I think the only character where the rep felt more personal was with Jacob, but that is also partially like how autism manifests. The fact of like, I'm not trying to make this a thing. However, you need to know because of this, compared to like some other mental illnesses. And I really like that she had that really delicate balance of I am not the blank character. I am the character that happens to be blank. And I think she does a really good job with all of her rep of knowing how much of it is like a personality thing, like knows Zaf with his anxiety, Jacob with the autism, Chloe with her chronic illness, and how much of it is just a factor of the person. Those same three things again, but then also like other aspects as well. I think there's a really lovely balance between the two that never feels too forced.
Right, exactly. No, I love that. Well, is there anything else that we wanted to talk about?
Not that I can think of at this exact second. I'm sure it was the second that we go off the live, I'll be, oh darn it, that.
Oh, yeah, always
No, I think just like a quick final thought is that I think that this one would appeal more towards someone who wants a contemporary over a romance, with the exception of the fact that this one has very explicit smutty scenes,
right,
but also felt more contemporary than Chloe that felt kind of rom-com-y the whole time.
right. Well, and like to clarify, it's because like the central struggle of Chloe's story is the relationship between Chloe and Red.
Yep.
Whereas with Dani, the central like thing is, yeah, they have a relationship, but the central thing is really them growing and discovering themselves.
Yes.
And learning about themselves.
Yes.
With the help of another person.
No, exactly. I think that's a big thing. It's the fact of like, yes, there is that whole fake dating trope, but the fake dating trope led to Zaf being able to work on his nonprofit. Right. And as that's going on, Dani's preparing for the symposium, and the relationship, while being a part of a means to an end, especially on Zaf's side of the story, is still the third plot point compared to these other two, where Chloe and Red, it definitely was more traditional rom-com.
Right, exactly.
Like, it started off as they have other things going on, but the relationship becomes way more centered. And I think both of those worked, kind of like we were saying before, because of the characters. Dani makes way more sense to have a romance in her life, but have 800 other things going on. Chloe made sense to be in a rom-com.
Right.
And I love that she was able to write that nuance.
Right. And I think, like, you know, I've heard criticism that, like, these two are so similar. You know, and even the like Eve is also very similar. And like, yes, they're a romance written by the same author, so yes, they're going to have similarities. But I think it's helped reading them back to back to show how different they are.
No,
like, totally, this is a very different story.
They're so different. It's tonally they're different. And because like a lot of people are like, well, of course they're different. They use different tropes. It's like, no, but like how they meet, why the characters make the choices that they do, the internal and external struggles, plot as a whole, like these are so different. And I agree. I definitely feel like if you read them 6 months apart, a month apart, a year apart, because of the relationship of the sisters solely, there's overlap. But if you marathon these feel so different. And I love that you can do that, because there is really frustrating things about books that after a while feel too similar. It's like, yeah, I can read these like a little while apart, but like you marathon the series, like, not to be rude, but I'm reading the same book 85 times.
Right.
These ones, on the other hand,
I don't feel like that.
So different, and it's one of the biggest strengths of the series, I think.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we will do Eve's story on Saturday, whatever date that is.
The
10th?
10th. Saturday
the 10th. Time to be determined, but make sure you check out my Instagram and Twitter. But it'll probably be the same time, because this general tends to work for us.
Time seems to be our lucky time. So
there you go. Well, thank you all for joining. Do you have anything you want to plug on your channel?
Yes, I will hopefully be coming back next week. I am very behind on a lot of things, but Battle of the Books is returning, Wheel of TBR is returning, and I think I have a few other things in the works too, but I will for sure be back next week, and I'm really excited with the new content, because I think there is some fun stuff, especially the Battle of the Books. Yes, I have a couple in progress, but the one I originally sent for July also can happen, and it is horror themed, and I'm really excited.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for joining, and we will see you next week.